Well, that was one of the preseason games of all time. Not exactly how I want to spend my weekend watching the Kings just get absolutely demolished in a preseason game. It's supposed to, the preseason isn't supposed to be like this. The preseason is supposed to be chill and, you just get to watch the guys play because the result doesn't matter, Against the Warriors, it's like we lose both games. Who cares? Our regulars outscored their regulars. It's just the end of the bench guys. Who cares? But man, this game was just embarrassing. And I feel like the reason it just felt so bad is because it felt like something that the Kings would absolutely do in the regular season. It felt like this was kind of a replica of a game that the Kings played against the Trailblazers in Sacramento last year during the regular season, where you're just constantly turning the ball over, you can't hit anything from three, and you keep thinking like it's going to get better, it's going to get better, and then it just, never really does. But thankfully, it is preseason. Thankfully, it doesn't count. I mean, you kind of expect moments like this in the preseason where you're turning the ball over 26 times. Like that's not necessarily unexpected, but through the first two games, the offense, especially with the starting unit, was so clean and it looked so good and everyone was kind of playing well, right? Everyone was getting involved and making the right plays. And then in this game, it just felt like nobody could ever make the right play. The Kings actually held a lead early in this game, and they held a lead for a good amount of the first half just from transition. And so that's one bright spot is they were getting out and running and they were killing the Trailblazers in transition. And that was despite the Trailblazers owning the points off turnovers. And so the Kings were just able to get out and run both off some turnovers but also off missed shots. I think Keegan had 10 points in the first half, and 8 of them were on the fast break. 2 of them through his own steals, and then I think he just had 2 other baskets just running the floor. And that was something Mike Brown had emphasized in his press conference pregame, was especially running to the corners. And so the Kings did a good job of that. We saw Jordan McLaughlin get his first minutes, which was cool. And he came in and immediately made an impact. And he ran to the corner just like Mike Brown wanted to knock down a three. Despite the sloppiness at the start, things were feeling okay, but then it was just all fell apart, in kind of the second half of the second quarter and the third quarter. It started with a few just misplaced passes from Sabonis, passes that he was easily making in the previous 2 games that he just didn't make in this game. And it was especially on those backdoor cuts because the Trailblazers were being super physical on the perimeter. And so the backdoor cut was there, but the Kings and Sabonis just wasn't able to find those passes. And then once those passes, weren't working, then that's when the Kings offense just completely lost all flow in the half court because the Trailblazers, super physical, super disruptive on the perimeter, just pushing the Kings further and further back. And it totally disrupted anything the Kings had going offensively when they couldn't keep the Blazers honest on the back cuts. I mean, the Kings were being active defensively as well. They were getting a bunch of deflections and turnovers early on. And it's not like the Blazers took care of the ball all that well. And it's not like the Blazers were killing us offensively. I think at times it just felt like that because the Blazers were scoring so much off of turnovers and the Kings just couldn't score at all. So, you just keep seeing that Blazer lead go up and up. But the defense wasn't necessarily that bad. I think there were a few things that we saw from the defense that were poor. In the first half, it was points in the paint, and it was mainly off of offensive rebounds. The Kings allowed 12 offensive rebounds. They got 12 offensive rebounds themselves. Maybe not as impressive when you shoot 18% from three. There's going to be a lot of offensive rebounds available. But the Kings were giving up those rebounds because the Blazers were getting into the paint, and then either Sabonis or Alex Len would have to come over and contest a shot, and then whoever they were leaving, whether it was Klingon inside or Aiton, they were just picking up the scraps and getting easy buckets inside because you didn't have that second player coming over to help with the rebound, or they were just too small to be able to really do anything about the rebound. And so that's, I think, one of the Kings' weaknesses and why they need to keep things on the perimeter, because once the other team commits our center, whoever that is, it's going to be kind of a rough time trying to get the rebound. Because I thought Sabonis and Alex Len were both really good when it came to rim protection. Sabonis had 2 blocks. Alex Len only had 1 block. But I think overall, blocks isn't necessarily how you gauge rim protection. And they were doing very well contesting around the rim. But it was just the Kings were unable to then come up with the rebound to finish those possessions off. So you're looking at Keegan only having 1 defensive rebound, Keon having 1 defensive rebound, DeRozan having 2 defensive rebounds. Like, those guys need to be able to contribute more when it comes to defensive rebounding, I think. 2 guys that I loved what they were doing on the boards defensively. Isaiah Crawford had some really nice moments rebounding. He had 5 rebounds in 13 minutes, 3 of them defensive. And then Isaac Jones came up with some really nice defensive rebounds. So that's important. Those 2 guys also did a good job on the offensive glass as well. And I think the Kings as a whole did a good job on the offensive glass. But like I said, when you're missing so many shots, it's more opportunities. So the offensive rebounding numbers are going to look a little better than maybe they should be if you would just knock down some open shots. I mean, the Kings just couldn't score in the half court at all. And part of it was them just not being able to make a 3. They went 3 for 6 to start the game from 3 and then finished 5 for 28. I think they missed 16 straight at one point, if my counting was correct. And there were a lot of wide open shots. And I think them not being able to knock down those shots then led to some hesitation. And there was some hesitation from Keon Ellis at times when shooting the ball. He needs to just fire away. And a few other guys as well, just not taking open shots. And in those moments, that contributed to even more turnovers. Because when you're not taking those shots, it's going to be hard to find another shot when you're late in the shot clock that's as good as the shot that you could have taken from the perimeter. And it results in a lot of turnovers because it's late shot clock. Or honestly, because if you're not taking that shot and you're driving, that just means the defense was already collapsed in the paint. So you're just driving into bodies. And I think we saw a lot of that. So guys just have to be confident because the Kings have not been shooting well at all in this preseason. I don't think they've shot over 30% in any of the 3 games that they've played so far. The one thing that I was very excited about coming into this game was being able to see Jordan McLaughlin, obviously a new player, making his debut with the team. And he came in and he was really good right away. He came in and played with a 3-guard lineup of Fox, Monk, himself, obviously, Keegan, and Sabonis. And so that right away kind of answered the questions. Are the Kings going to go with that type of 3-guard lineup? Just immediately, yes. And he came in. He affected Scoot Henderson's shot at the rim. Then he drove right down to the other end for a layup. Then he made a great full court pass off of a made basket to Sabonis running the floor. He ran to the corner, made a 3. Like, he was doing everything well. Then there were a few moments like late in the half when he turned the ball over, he got blown by. But those are things you kind of expect from a guy that just came back from injury, wasn't able to participate in training camp much, and is coming into a new team. So you kind of expect some of those bad moments from a guy like J-Mac, whereas the rest of the team, they don't really have that excuse. And I think there were a few times where you could see it was a little out of sync. Like him and Keegan were just in the same spot in the corner on one play that led to a Monk turnover because Monk draws 2 defenders. So there's 2 Kings on the wing or in the corner with 1 defender, except those Kings were standing right on top of each other. So the defender could just guard both of them, and it led to a turnover. So things like that should be able to get ironed out pretty quickly. But overall, yeah, I liked what we saw from Jordan McLaughlin. The way that he was able to drive to the rim and keep his head up and keep his options open, ready to finish at the rim, but also ready to, find open teammates and never really like committing to anything until he had an actual option that he wanted to go to. So that was good to see. We also saw in the first half a lot of DeMar DeRozan's playmaking, and in this preseason in general, he is constantly finding Keon Ellis open. And in this game, it didn't really result in much. Keon didn't, always knock down those shots. But DeMar did find him a lot, and he also found Sabonis inside a few times, and really just showed off the playmaking and getting out and running in transition and being able to make a play from there. Just adding another player that can make a play out there helps in all facets, but especially in transition. That's what we saw in this game, him kind of making plays in transition. One very big problem for the Kings in this game, in the first half especially, was the free throw differential. By the end of the first half, it was 18 free throws attempted for the Trailblazers to 7 for the Kings. And you could see Fox especially was getting super frustrated with the officiating. I think DeMar was as well, and Fox had 5 fouls by halftime. And I get some of his frustration because the Trailblazers were being super physical on the perimeter, and then when he tried to give it back, he was called for a very weak offensive foul. But I think a lot of it has to do with the Blazers set the tone on the perimeter to be super physical all game, where the Kings were trying to be physical once the Blazers got into the paint. And that's where they were calling the fouls. Once you get into the paint, they're going to call more of those fouls when you're trying to go up for the shot, rather than just kind of the stuff that you're doing on the perimeter, maybe off ball. And so I think the Kings can learn from that and be more physical and take from what the Trailblazers did in this game and apply it to their own game, in their own game on the defensive side. But also, obviously, they just need to be able to handle that pressure more. And you're hoping that DeMar DeRozan helps in that. But he also had some turnovers, and the Kings could never really get into their offense because of that disruption from the Trailblazers. And then there were some things that you just hope are just like preseason things. Sabonis missing 3 finishes that he normally makes around the rim. I mean, Colby Jones also just absolutely smoked a layup, a wide open layup, and some passes just not hitting the target. At one point in the second quarter, when Portland was really putting the pressure on, there was a time where DeMar kind of got himself more involved in the offense and made some good plays. And so that's good to see, because last season Fox was really the only guy that could kind of turn it on when the Kings needed it. So now you do have another guy that can do that, although it didn't end up being that successful. But I think you saw how it could be successful in a game where the Kings aren't playing this poorly. There also were a few times where the Kings kind of tried to go to zone and they just kind of looked confused. That didn't work out. We saw a zone work against the Warriors, and it just didn't work here. And then I was really hoping once we got into the second half, like things would turn around, but they just came out, immediately turned the ball right over again, more turnovers. And it was just more of the same, the Kings not being able to get much offense outside of transition. Also, the Trailblazers started to hit some threes, and that's when they really extended the lead. There were some positives, though, from a few guys. I mean, Keon Ellis, while he didn't have a great game, but there were some positives from him on the defensive end. I thought he was very active defensively, and he was also running the floor really hard the other way and getting easy baskets. Keegan, like I said, was also running the floor very hard, but we also saw a few times where he was really trying to take the ball at the basket. One of them, he just missed a layup. He also got called for a charge, but he also had some other nice takes to the basket that resulted in him actually scoring. So I think the mindset from Keegan was really good, and I think he's had a good preseason so far. J-Mac, I said, was solid. He also took a charge. Monk was also back in this one, and he didn't have a great game. He couldn't hit from 3. He was turning the ball over, but he also had some good moments of getting out in transition. I mean, I feel like everyone kind of did. They had moments where they were getting out in front of everyone and scoring. But really, we saw Isaiah Crawford be the guy that came in and played with the second unit, which was very interesting. And I thought he had a really solid game. I already talked about his rebounding, but also the other things he did. He looked more calm and composed on the offensive side of the floor, where he would catch the ball and he wouldn't just immediately get rid of it, but instead, he would go around a screen. He would take his time, find the right pass. There's one possession in particular where he finds a pass to a guy in the corner. He relocates back out to the 3-point line. The ball comes back out to him. He throws one more pass to DeMar up top DeMar misses the three, but then who's there for the offensive rebound? Isaiah Crawford right there. And he gets the Kings another possession. He then turned it over on that possession, but I'll cut him some slack on that because it was kind of late shot clock. He was throwing kind of a grenade and he just turned it over. I thought he had some really good contests on 3-point shooters. He knocked down 1 out of 3 threes, which was a lot better than everyone else. So we'll take that. And I just thought he had a really solid game, played 13 minutes. Isaac Jones came in later in the game, played 8 minutes, but again showed some nice things of being able to rebound the ball, being really strong inside, and then being able to make the right feed out of that. So kind of attracting defenses inside with his strength, but then being able to have the wherewithal to find the open man. So those two guys continue to impress. Mason Jones didn't get much time and didn't get super involved, so he didn't really redeem himself. Colby Jones had 10 minutes and again was not great. So really, when you're looking at the deep bench guys right now, it's definitely Isaiah Crawford and Isaac Jones who are making the biggest impact. Mike Brown had said that the starters could play all the way in this game if the game was close enough. And so that they did play in the fourth quarter, but didn't go all the way to the end because it wasn't close. And so we didn't see Jalen McDaniels, Terry Taylor, Scal, Broderick Thomas, Boogie Ellis. We didn't see any of those guys. Boogie Ellis being the one guy where it's, kind of disappointing that we didn't get to see him. But everyone else, it's like, yeah, we don't really need to see them. I mean, Jalen McDaniels is on the roster, so maybe we should see him a little bit more because it's not like he's just a training camp guy, but we'll probably see him in the next 2 games a little bit, at least the last game where I doubt the Kings will play the full starting lineup much. Obviously, this is just a preseason game, but one of the things that we heard with DeMar DeRozan coming in was like, we won't have as many of these games where, you're at home against a bad team and you just suck and you lose the game, you get blown out. Like, there won't be as many because DeMar's going to hold guys accountable. And, it's a preseason game, so we're not going to judge it based off this game, but obviously it is disappointing to get blown out. If we lost this game in a close manner, I wouldn't have cared, but it's just the manner of how we lost that reminds me, it brings up that PTSD from last season of how we lost so many games. Also, we saw DeMar go 0 for 2 from the free throw line, so that's not fun. So, hopefully it's not the Kings free throw curse coming to get him. We also just need to see the Kings shoot better. Like, you can't shoot 18% from 3, and they've been awful this preseason in shooting. I'm not, worried about that yet, but it's just something to keep an eye on at this point. The Kings finish up preseason with 2 road games against Utah and the Clippers, and hopefully in just one of those games, we see the Kings kind of explode from 3, just so we know that is still there. I need to see Keegan actually be able to knock down a 3. Obviously, getting guys like Kevin Huerter and Trey Lyles back would impact that a lot, so we need to keep that in mind as well. But I just want to see the Kings not get overwhelmed on the offensive end like they did in this game. Make those adjustments and be able to handle that pressure in a better way. And obviously, I don't know how much the Kings plan on playing the starters versus bench guys, but I hope that we continue to see Isaiah Crawford get opportunity with the rest of the second unit to see what he can continue to do, and then Isaac Jones as well. Hopefully this isn't a sign of things to come, and the Kings are just, kind of getting out the bad turnovers, the threes, getting the rust out of their systems before the regular season starts. But that is it for this episode of the Roll Report. If you are watching still this long in, make sure to like, comment, subscribe. Shout out, as always, to Joe Mama for being a member on the channel. And I will see you guys in the next one after the game in Utah. Peace.